My Bill Hempel 25% L-4 Grasshopper showed up double boxed and nicely wrapped. There was another internal cover in here that I've already ripped out. The major parts come wrapped in this thin foam and in a plastic bag beneath that. And all that packing did its job because I couldn't find a thing wrong with this plane anywhere. I think it's about impossible to ship a plane through all the time zones and weather changes that these go through, but this one came out with just a couple little wrinkles in it. This covering job is remarkable. Something else that's remarkable is that they put all the windows in for us. That's a whole bunch of little screws that I could mess up. This doorway is the only access to the interior, so thankfully they didn't glue the hinges in for this or the window above it. That's going to make working on the interior to get everything installed a lot easier. It looks like we've got all kinds of room in the interior, but I'll bet you that goes away quick when we start putting all the pieces in. I did check all of the glue joints and all those look good, and I'm going to hit all of these with some thin CA just to be sure. The firewall comes marked so you can align your drilling template for the motor. This knockout is for installing canister exhaust systems, but I'm going to take it out and use it for installing batteries and that to get that weight forward. We also have to install the windshield, but I like that because this access might be important when we're installing everything in the interior. You do get a bunch of good hardware with this kit, including 5-inch tall tires. In the pictures of this plane, I thought the tires looked way too small and was going to order a set, but these should be just fine. And finally, we've got the horizontal stabilizer with the elevators on it and the rudder. These all use pin hinges, and we do have to epoxy these in place. The ailerons are completely installed and ready to fly, so all we have to do is add the hardware to the wing. And again, we got a nice covering job. I needed a warbird for my fleet, and this is going to do nicely. With my iron set below half power, I went over all the seams. It had to shrink out a couple little wrinkles in the ailerons, but that's all it took. Checking all of the seams is something we should do on any airplane. The first bit of assembly is going to be installing the horizontal stabilizer. I could have got the stabilizer in without removing this piece, but I like taking it out because it's easier to slide the stabilizer in and not get epoxy all over everything. The next thing we want to do is install the carbon fiber wing tube, center that, and then tape it so we know that it stays centered. One of the things they use that wing tube for is to look and see if the stabilizer is parallel with the wing. It's hard to do this on camera, but you just set that wing tube on top of the stabilizer and see if it matches all the way across. If not, you can work the stabilizer saddle to get this lined up. Next, we have to square the horizontal stabilizer to the wing, and we start out by centering this at the back end. And then we want to measure on both sides from the tip of the wing tube to the tip of the horizontal stabilizer. This is important, so take your time and get both sides of this measurement identical. Getting the elevator square to the wing has got a lot to do with how this plane's going to fly. Then we mark the covering on both sides of the fuselage, top and bottom. Next, with the iron on a relatively low setting, I make sure that the covering is sealed down to the wood beneath it. And then I use a straight edge to slice the covering about 1/8 of an inch in from those layout marks. Then I can peel the covering off and expose the wood so we get a good epoxy joint. Always use 30 or 45-minute epoxy. We want this slow setting. After coating the wood on the stabilizer and the insides of the saddle, I slide it in from the back, and that helps keep some of the epoxy from oozing out all over the plane. Right now we're going to have the most excess epoxy that we're going to have during this operation, so I spray that with just plain alcohol and wipe it off and get rid of the excess. After it's centered, I'll do this again just to make sure I've got all the epoxy out, and it also forms a little fillet. And then we carefully measure the corners again to make sure that we have the horizontal stabilizer perfectly aligned. This low set epoxy gives you time to get this right. You can really ruin the performance of an airplane if you try and rush this or do it by eye. Take your time, measure the corners, and get it right. This stabilizer was just a little bit low on the left side, and when I check it again here, it's still just a little bit under, but I got a way to fix that too. I used a piece of masking tape from the outside corner to the vertical stab, with just enough pressure to pull it up even with the wing tube. And check this, and then the corners again before you let it dry to make sure that nothing's moved. One of the last jobs for today is measuring for the servo extensions. Make sure you give yourself some extra room. We don't want a tight wire anywhere. If the wire's snug at all, vibrations will unplug it. I put a piece of tape at the end of the servo wire and then measure from that tape to where I'm going to have the receiver to get my actual extension length. And I'll be flying this with a Spectrum DX8 transmitter and an AR8000 receiver with the satellite receiver.